The lonely lumberjack hadn't meant to stop in town that evening. The sky was already bruising purple with the promise of snow, and the forest paths would soon be hard to read in the dark. He had spent weeks alone among the pines, cutting and hauling, listening to nothing but the rasp of his own breath and the steady bite of steel into wood. $2 lay heavy in his pocket, the last of his pay until spring. He planned to buy bread, maybe a bit of salt, and head back before the weather turned. The trading post was nearly empty, its lamps dim, its air thick with the smell of smoke and damp wool. He nodded to the clerk, a man who had learned not to ask questions of quiet customers, and set the coins on the counter. As the clerk reached for the loaf, a muffled sound came from outside, soft, almost like a whimper. The lumberjack paused, head tilting. Years in the woods had trained him to listen for small things. "What's that?" he asked. The clerk's hand stilled. "Nothing you want," he muttered. "Best keep to your business." But the sound came again, unmistakable now. The lumberjack stepped to the door and pushed it open. Cold rushed in, sharp as a blade. By the post, half hidden in shadow, sat a rough burlap sack tied at the top. It shifted, just slightly, as if something inside had drawn a breath. He looked back at the clerk. "What is it?" The clerk sighed, weary and irritated. "A problem. Someone's responsibility no more. Take your bread and go." The lumberjack didn't move. He had seen traps in the forest, snares meant for animals that struggled until there was nothing left but silence. The memory tightened his chest. Without another word, he walked back inside, picked up the 2 coins from the counter, and placed them again, this time with a quiet finality. "I'll take the bread," he said, "and whatever's outside." The clerk stared at him. "For $2, you don't know what you're buying." "I know," the lumberjack said. "I'm buying the chance to stop wondering." Outside, the wind tugged at his coat as he knelt by the sack. His hands were rough, scarred from years of work, but he loosened the knot with care. He stepped back, giving space, and waited. The sack fell open, and a young woman slowly emerged, unsteady on her feet. She was smaller than he'd expected, her hair tangled, her face pale from cold and fear. She stood straight anyway, chin lifted, eyes meeting his as if daring him to flinch. "Don't mistake me," she said quickly, words tumbling out like stones. "I don't belong to anyone. I won't be owned, but I needed to get out." The lumberjack swallowed. He had imagined many things, injury, sickness, something feral, but not this fierce, trembling resolve. He took off his coat and held it out, not stepping closer. "You'll freeze," he said simply. She hesitated, then took it, wrapping it tight around herself. "Thank you," she murmured, as if the word were unfamiliar. They walked away from the post together, the town shrinking behind them. Snow began to fall, light at first, then steadier, softening the edges of the world. He kept his pace slow, matching hers. The forest opened to them, dark and quiet, the path he knew by heart winding between the trees. After a while, she spoke again. "I don't expect kindness," she said, voice thin in the cold. "Only fairness. I can work, I can earn my keep." He nodded. "Everyone works," he said. "That's fair." She drew a breath, bracing herself. "If that's not enough," she added, eyes fixed on the ground, "I can offer more." He stopped. The snow fell between them, hushed and heavy. He looked at her then, not with hunger, not with judgment, but with a sudden, sharp clarity. He saw what the road had taught her, the bargains it had forced into her mouth. His jaw tightened. "No," he said, firm but gentle. "That's not how this goes." Her eyes lifted, startled. "You paid." "I paid to stop a wrong," he said. "Not to make a new one." They continued on, the silence different now, less brittle. When his cabin finally appeared, a dark shape against the snow, he lit the lantern and opened the door wide, standing aside. "You can come in," he said. "You'll be warm. We'll talk in the morning." She crossed the threshold slowly, as if expecting the floor to give way. The door closed behind them with a solid thud, and for the first time that night, the wind was kept out. The cabin warmed quickly once the fire caught, the crackle of burning pine filling the small space with a steady, reassuring sound. The lonely lumberjack moved with practiced ease, hanging his coat to dry, setting a pot on the stove. He didn't look at her too much, not wanting to startle her, but he was aware of every small movement she made, the way she hovered near the door, the way her shoulders stayed tight as if bracing for a blow that never came. "You can sit," he said, nodding toward the rough wooden chair near the hearth. "You're safe here." Safe. The word landed strangely in her chest. She lowered herself onto the chair, hands folded in her lap, eyes darting around the cabin. It was simple. One room, sturdy table, shelves lined with tools and jars, but it felt solid in a way she hadn't known for a long time. Nothing here looked temporary. Nothing looked like it would vanish overnight. He poured water into a tin cup and handed it to her. She took it with both hands, fingers trembling, and drank slowly. The warmth seemed to travel straight through her, loosening something she hadn't realized she was holding tight. "My name is Elias," he said after a moment, sitting across from her but leaving space between them. "You don't have to tell me yours tonight if you don't want to." She studied his face, the weathered lines, the calm eyes, the way he waited without pressing. "Mara," she said finally. Saying her name out loud felt like reclaiming it. "My name is Mara." Elias nodded once. "All right, Mara." Silence settled again, but it wasn't heavy. The fire popped, sending sparks dancing. Outside, the wind howled against the logs, a reminder of what they'd left behind. Mara stared into the flames, her thoughts tangling. This was the moment, she knew, when kindness often revealed its cost. It always had before. "I should be clear," she said, voice tight. "I don't want you to think I'm ungrateful. I've learned not to assume." Elias leaned back slightly, giving her room. "Assume what? That help comes free," she said. Her fingers twisted together. "Men don't usually pay for nothing. When I took the sack off back there, I thought you'd expect me to make good on it. He frowned, not in anger but confusion edged with something like sorrow. Make good on what? On being worth the money, she said quietly. The words hit him harder than any blow. Elias stared at the fire, jaw working. He'd spent his life wrestling trees and storms, but this felt like standing before a wound he hadn't caused yet somehow felt responsible for. Mara, he said slowly, $2 doesn't buy a person. It buys bread, a tool, a night's rest. It doesn't buy you. She laughed softly, a sound without humor. The world doesn't usually agree. Then the world's wrong, he replied. She looked at him then, really looked, searching for mockery or hidden expectation. She found none. Her breath hitched, and she turned away quickly, embarrassed by the sting in her eyes. I can work, she said again, more firmly this time. I can cook, clean, help with the wood. I don't want to be a burden. Elias stood and fetched a bowl of stew from the stove, setting it on the table between them. Everyone who stays here works, he said. Including me. That's not a debt, that's a way of living. She hesitated, then took the bowl. The first spoonful nearly undid her. It wasn't just the taste, it was the fact that no one was watching her eat as if counting bites. No one was reminding her what she owed. As she ate, Elias spoke of practical things, where she could sleep, what time he usually rose, how the days ran when the snow came heavy. He spoke plainly, without flourish, and somehow that steadiness calmed her more than any grand promise could have. When she finished, he showed her to a small pallet near the hearth, thick with blankets. You can take the bed once you're comfortable, he said. For tonight, this will do. She nodded, overwhelmed. As he turned away to bank the fire, she stopped him. Why? She asked. Why help me? Elias considered the question. Because leaving you there would have been wrong, he said at last. And because I know what it's like to be alone longer than you planned. Mara lay down, the warmth of the fire seeping into her bones. As sleep crept in, she realized something unfamiliar. She wasn't rehearsing her escape. She wasn't calculating what she'd need to survive the morning. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to rest, not as a bargain struck, but as a person given time. Across the room, Elias sat by the fire a while longer, listening to her breathing even out. He told himself this was temporary, just a shelter from the storm. But as the wind raged outside and the cabin held, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had already shifted, something neither of them could undo. Morning came quietly, the storm spent, leaving the world outside the cabin hushed and bright beneath a clean layer of snow. Pale sunlight slipped through the small window panes, catching on the frost and turning it to gold. Mara woke slowly, confused at first by the warmth around her. For a heartbeat, she expected shouting, demands, the sharp reminder of what she owed. Instead, there was only the crackle of embers and the steady, comforting smell of coffee. She sat up, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The cabin felt different in daylight, less like a hiding place and more like a home. Everything had its place. Nothing was broken beyond repair. She heard movement outside, the dull thud of an axe splitting wood, and something in her chest eased. He was still here. Elias came in a few minutes later, cheeks flushed from the cold, snow clinging to his boots. He paused when he saw her awake. Morning, he said, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Morning, she replied, her voice rough with sleep. He set a mug on the table and slid it toward her. It's hot. Careful. She wrapped her hands around it, savoring the heat. They sat in a comfortable silence, the kind that didn't demand filling. Outside, the forest stood tall and patient, as it always had. Inside, something fragile but real was taking shape. I should tell you, Mara said after a moment, staring into the dark surface of the coffee, I won't stay if you change your mind. Elias met her gaze steadily. I won't, he said. But if you decide to go, you'll go with supplies. And you won't be rushed. Her throat tightened. You don't even know me. I know enough, he replied. You asked for fairness. That's what this is. The day unfolded gently. Elias showed her how to split kindling, how to hang herbs near the stove, how to read the sky for weather. He didn't hover, didn't correct her sharply when she made mistakes. When she nicked her finger, he handed her a cloth without comment, his concern quiet but present. By afternoon, Mara realized she was smiling, really smiling, for no reason other than the simple rhythm of shared work. It startled her. Happiness had always felt borrowed, something that could be taken back at any moment. Here, it felt earned. As dusk approached, she grew serious. There's something I need to say, she told him, standing near the door, watching the shadows lengthen. Elias nodded. All right, what I offered you that first night, she said carefully, I don't want you to think I was trying to trap you. I was trying to survive. I know, he said immediately. But I need to hear it said, she continued. That it's not expected, ever. Elias stepped closer, stopping well within her sight but not her space. Mara, he said, voice low and certain, nothing like that will ever be expected here. If you stay, it's because you choose to. Not because you owe me. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for years. Tears welled, unbidden. Then I choose to stay, she said, barely above a whisper. Something shifted then, not loud, not dramatic, but deep. Elias reached out, hesitating until she nodded. When his hand rested lightly at her waist, it wasn't a claim born of ownership. It was steady, grounding, a promise of presence. She leaned into it, feeling how naturally they fit, how safe the closeness felt. I won't pretend I don't feel something, he said quietly. But I won't rush it. We'll let it grow right, or not at all. Mara nodded against his shoulder. That's all I want, she said. The chance to choose. Winter deepened over the weeks that followed, but the cabin grew warmer. They shared meals, stories, laughter that came easier each day. Mara's hands grew sure with work, Elias's silences grew less lonely. One evening, as snow fell thick and soft outside, Elias spoke what had been building in his chest. I don't want you leaving when the thaw comes, he said. Not unless you want to. I'd like you to stay. With me. She looked at him, eyes shining, and smiled. Forever? She asked, half teasing, half hopeful. He answered without hesitation. Forever. In a world that had once measured her worth in coins, Mara found herself chosen, not bought, not bargained for, but wanted. And Elias, who had lived so long with only the forest for company, found that choosing her filled the quiet places in him he thought were permanent. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, two lives settled together, not by force or desperation, but by a choice freely made, one that would carry them, hand in hand, into all the seasons to come.